All the Young Dudes, Sirius's Perspective by ROLLERCOASTERWORDS. Chapter 12, First Year, Christmas, 1971. Sirius hated Christmas. He always had. Ever since he could remember, Christmas for the blacks meant family dinners and boring galas, and far too many of Sirius's relatives hanging about in their dress robes. His mother was always on edge, ready to snap at a moment's notice under the stress of playing the perfect hostess. His father grew sombre and strict, always watching his sons to ensure they did nothing to embarrass him. It was altogether joyless. Even the presents were boring, books about family history or dusty heirlooms that served no purpose past decoration. So as November drew to a close and December edged brittle and biting into Hogwarts, Sirius grew more and more sullen. While other students chatted about holiday parties and presents and family visits, he scolded and threw himself into research, spending hours in the library. Even James was becoming insufferable. He kept talking about his mother's mince pies or how badly he hoped it would snow. Last year, my dad apparated us to this huge hill outside of London. I side-alonged. It felt so weird. He charmed the sleds so we wouldn't fall off. It was unbelievable how fast. Sirius slammed his book shut. They were sitting in the common room, next to the roaring fireplace. Remus and Peter were playing a game of gobstones on the floor, and James was holding a Quidditch magazine. He hadn't been reading it, though. Instead, he'd been chattering on, once again, about Christmas. "Do you mind?" Sirius snapped. "I'm trying to read." James fell silent, and both Peter and Remus glanced up from once they heard the book slam, a thick tome on ocular transfiguration. Now they watched in tense silence. Sorry, mate," James said awkwardly. Remus's lips were pursed, like he thought Sirius was being ridiculous, and Peter was looking back down at his gobstones nervously. Sirius knew he wasn't being fair, but he couldn't help responding to the sharp prick of irritation he felt at the excitement in James's voice. They would be boarding the train the following morning, and his own nerves were stretched thin. "It's fine," he muttered. "It's too loud to concentrate down here anyway." He picked up his book and retreated to their room, hoping to make a dignified exit. He was already embarrassed about snapping at James. He got frustrated with Peter all the time, and even Remus, but never James. It felt strange. Of course, James Potter was too good to hold it against him. That night, when Sirius tiptoed over to his bed, the other boy let him in immediately. Sirius didn't even have time to speak before James was apologizing. "Look, Sirius, I'm sorry about earlier. I wasn't thinking. I know that Christmas is rough for you." "No," Sirius gaped, horrified with himself. "No, I should be the one apologizing. It's not your fault my family's awful. You have every right to be excited. I'll try to be less of a miserable git." They were both smiling, all forgiven, and Sirius felt an incredible sense of relief. What could he do without James Potter? The next morning, Remus came to see them off at the station. He was staying at Hogwarts over the break. James had invited him to come visit, but apparently there was some sort of complication with Muggle law that meant he wasn't allowed. James had also invited Sirius to stay with his family, but of course, Sirius had to refuse. He could only imagine how his parents would respond if he asked to go to the Potters for Christmas. As they boarded the train, James promised Remus that they'd write, saying conspiratorially, see if he can come up with the next plan of attack on Snape." Remus nodded and smiled, waving at them from the platform. He looked a bit gloomy, but Sirius thought to himself that he'd switch places in a heartbeat. Mucking about at Hogwarts sounded much better than where he was going. Sirius tried to keep his promise to be less miserable on the train, but he was quiet and withdrawn for most of the ride. James didn't push him, keeping up a steady conversation with Peter that carefully skirted around all Christmas-related topics. As they drew closer and closer to London, Sirius found himself tuning them out, too preoccupied with his own thoughts to listen. By the time they reached the station, his heart was a closed fist in his chest. His father was there to pick him up. Orion frowned deeply as he watched his son bid goodbye to James Potter and Peter Pettigrew, but said nothing until they were out of the crowded station. "I thought I told you to stay away from the impure." Unlike his mother, whose voice grew shrill when she was upset, his father's voice only grew quieter when he was angry. The words were hissed, venomous. Sirius flinched. "Peter and James are purebloods too," he mumbled defensively, staring down at his feet as they walked. His father sniffed. "The Potters are some of the worst blood traitors in history," he said fiercely. "If they had their way, the entire wizarding world, our entire way of life would crumble around us. Do you understand?" Sirius shrugged, and his father gripped his arm. "Answer me when I speak to you, boy." Sirius's arm ached where the fingers dug into flesh. He gritted his teeth. "I understand." His arrival home was just as horrible as Sirius had expected it to be. It had only been a few months since he left, but it was jarring to approach the dark manor with his family's crest emblazoned over the door. It didn't look any different, but as they entered the wood-panelled hall and passed under the sneering portraits of his ancestors, Sirius couldn't deny that it felt different, less like home. He missed the warmth of the Gryffindor common room. His mother was waiting in the sitting room, along with Reg. Sirius breathed, smiling for the first time since he stepped onto the Hogwarts Express. He started forward, grinning, eager to greet his brother, but Regulus shrank back slightly and didn't return the smile. Sirius halted, stung. What was that about? He realized quickly that it must be the presence of his parents that caused Regulus to withdraw. His mother abhorred what she referred to mawkish displays of sentiment. She had intoned countless times that such affection was emasculine, a sign of weakness. Still, Sirius had hoped that his brother would be excited to see him. His mother set in immediately, droning on about how incredibly disappointed she was in the sorting, how he had brought shame to the entire family, how his great-aunt had nearly had a fit when she heard the news. This verbal lashing led to what seemed to be an endless series of rules for his behaviour. Now that he was home, he was to act at all times with decorum and respect for the Black family name. Throughout this cheerful greeting, Regulus remained silent, barely meeting Sirius's eye. His mother's words hardly even stung because Sirius was too busy trying to figure out what exactly was going on with his brother. Was Reg mad at him for failing to write? It wasn't as if he'd had control of the situation. He'd done his best. There was no chance to talk about it, though, until later that night, once everyone was in bed. Sirius snuck out of his room, darting down the hall. Regulus sat up once he opened the door. It was dark, but the moon was waxing outside, nearly full, and the light spilling through the window was enough to see. "Sirius? Reg!" Sirius shut the door behind him, bounding eagerly onto the bed. He grinned down at his brother. "Did you miss me?" Reg shifted uncomfortably, darting glances at the door. He still wasn't smiling. "Come on, you'll get us in trouble." "Oh, please." Sirius rolled his eyes. "You know they'll only punish me. It's not as if you've snuck out of bed. And I wanted to see you. I've missed you." Finally, a small smile curved across his brother's face. "Really? Of course." Sirius tried to ignore the guilt crawling around inside his chest as he thought about how much he dreaded coming home, even though it meant seeing his brother again. "I tried to write. Did you get my letters?" "Yeah, sort of. Mum wouldn't let me read them. They made her really angry." Reg drew his knees up to his chest, wrapping his arms around himself. "Ugh, I knew she was behind it. The old bat." Sirius scowled, and Reg giggled nervously. "Don't worry, I'll tell you all about it." And he did, whispering about classes and the magic, and the friends he'd made. He talked about how it felt to soar around a Quidditch pitch, the acidic smell of the potions exploding in class, the way the ghosts looked silvery in the candlelight of the Great Hall. "And there's this big fireplace in the Gryffindor common room. You'll see it next year. James and I are trying to figure out if we can pinch some of the potion's ingredients to change the colours." "What?" "The colours of the flames. Like if you add powdered newt." "No, I meant—" Regulus frowned, brow furrowed. "What do you mean I'll see you next year?" Sirius blinked. "When you're at Hogwarts?" Sirius blinked. "When you're at Hogwarts?" "Yeah, I know, but Sirius—" The door to Regulus's room swung open and Creature burst in. "Aha!" he cried, in his awful, reedy voice. "The young master is out of bed!" "Oh, bollocks." After the first week, his mother placed a locking charm on his door to ensure that Sirius remained in his own room at night. In retaliation, Sirius swapped about the plaques under the portraits lining the hallway, so that each of the paintings had the incorrect name. This only made his mother angrier. She rapped a ruler against the back of his knuckles until they were bruised, then made him switch everything back with aching fingers. "Just let it go," Regulus said that evening, as Sirius sulked in the library. "You'll only upset her more." "A marauder never backs down," Sirius insisted, frowning. He was trying to remember a prank that Remus had explained to him, something that involved laundry. Regulus rolled his eyes and said a bit sharply, "You're not at all caught, Sirius. A marauder never abandons his code." Regulus shook his head, but he was smiling a little as he said, exasperated, "Honestly, you're as bad as your mudblood friends." Sirius froze. "What?" Regulus blinked, smile dropping. "Your friends? I mean, it's just Mum says they're a bad influence." "Yeah, well, Mum's a right bitch, isn't she?" Sirius snapped, anger coiled in his veins. Since when did his little brother throw around words like mudblood? Reg looked hurt. "You shouldn't say things like that." "And you shouldn't talk about my friends." Sirius stood, seething. "I'm sorry," Reg said. "Come on, Sirius. Don't go. I'm sorry." Sirius huffed, still hot with anger, but he sat back down muttering, "James and Peter are purebloods anyway." "Yeah, you told me," Reg said. It was discomforting. Sirius had never felt so out of sync. He and Reg had always been on the same page, his little brother listening eagerly to his every word. So Sirius thought that Reg understood, as he did, that most of what their parents said was horseshit. But 4 months had made a difference. During his weeks at home, Sirius had felt out of step more and more. He kept making comments, expecting Reg to agree, only for his little brother to shake his head or roll his eyes. And the more Sirius spoke about Hogwarts, the more Regulus seemed to withdraw, as if hearing about school made him angry. Sirius couldn't figure out what he was doing wrong. There were these moments where he thought that they might even fight. But at the end of the day, Reg always softened, shrugging off whatever was bothering him to smile and laugh along with his brother. In those moments, it felt as though nothing had changed. Things were easy, effortless between them. They were still best friends after all. Friday the 23rd of December, 1971. On the day of the annual Black Family Christmas dinner, Sirius and his brother were firmly on the same page. They spent the morning complaining to each other about the new dress robes their mother was making them wear, and they made a game of running around the house hiding from Creature. By the time the haggard household finally found them and sent them to wash up, both boys were giggling, faces flushed. And then their relatives started to arrive. The Blacks had a family dinner every year on the day before Christmas Eve, and this year was no different. Aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins. As the manor began to fill up with people, Reg became more and more withdrawn, while Sirius slouched, messing up his hair and muttering his hellos. Regulus was the picture of decorum, not a hair out of place, robes neatly pressed. He greeted each family member perfectly, exactly the way their parents expected. After the great aunt swept away, Sirius nudged Reggie, grinning. "Oi, my lord, should I bow to you?" Regulus rolled his eyes, but his lips quirked up. "Come on, it's not that hard to behave for one night." "Maybe not for you," Sirius laminated dramatically. "But for a marauder?" "Oh, quit it with the marauders," Reg snapped. Sirius fell silent, a bit surprised by the sting in his brother's voice. When Regulus saw his expression, he muttered, "Look, let's just not make her mad tonight, all right?" Sirius didn't need to ask who he was talking about. As their next relative approached, "He used to be fun." Reg stiffened, mouth a thin line, but did not respond. Sirius was in a sour mood for the rest of the night, and he slumped into his seat at dinner. He picked at the first course, ignoring the chatter of his relatives around them. It was all the same boring stuff as usual. Who got a new promotion at the ministry, whose child had run off to marry a muggle, whose niece was rumoured to be a squib. And then Sirius heard something that caught his attention. "A disgrace, but nowhere near as bad as the Potters," his aunt said primly, waving her glass of wine. Her husband chimed in. "Oh, don't get me started on Fleamont. The new reforms he's trying to push in the Muggle Relations Department are ridiculous. I'm ashamed to even work in the same building as him. Across the table, Bellatrix was watching Sirius with a mean glint in her eye. When she saw him looking back at her, she smiled. "Sirius, isn't the Potter boy one of your little friends?" Her parents fell silent, turning to look at him down at the table. His parents were staring too, obviously appalled. "Yeah," Sirius said, flushing. It felt like everyone had gone silent, listening for an answer. "I told you to stop hanging around that boy, Sirius," his father admonished loudly. "You should stop spending time with him immediately, at the start of next term. Am I clear?" Anger crawled once more up Sirius's throat. He spoke without thinking. "And how am I supposed to do that? He's my roommate, in case you forgot." His father's face went white with rage, and his mother hissed, "Sirius, do not speak to your father like that." "Oh, don't worry, Sirius," crooned Bellatrix, still grinning wickedly. "I'm sure no one will be forgetting your housemates any time soon." Around the table, his family was staring at him, their expressions ranging from mild disappointment to utter disgust. Sirius flushed with shame. He looked over at Regulus, but his brother was staring down at his plate, silent. "Fine, then." He lifted up his chin, directing his next words towards Bellatrix. "Great, I'm proud to be in Gryffindor, so I don't have to hang around a bunch of slimy gits like you and your friends." "Sirius!" his mother screeched. "Proud!" Orion Black bellowed, slamming down his gauntlet. "Proud! You have brought shame to your entire family." Across the table, his uncle nodded. "Never thought I'd see the day that the Black Heir would become a blood traitor. I was so embarrassed when I heard the news. 500 years!" And across the hall, his relatives broke out into protest, everyone shouting over each other. Sirius's heart was thundering in his chest, and he felt tears prickling the back of his eyes. "Enough!" Walpurga was almost screaming. Finally, everyone fell silent. She turned her cold gaze to Sirius. "Go to your room, now!" Sirius held her eyes for a moment, then relented, slamming his fork down and pushing his chair roughly away from the table. He held his head high as he left, hoping that his family couldn't see his shoulders shaking. That night, Sirius didn't turn when the door to his room opened. He could hear Reg creeping in, painfully slowly. "Sirius?" Silence. Fury beat like a heart against his ribcage, and he felt hot and prickly all over. "I know you're awake." Regulus crept closer to his bed, and the mattress shifted as his brother climbed in. Sirius grimaced into his pillow. "Go away, Reg." "Sirius, just go away. I thought you were worried about getting in trouble." Now he was sitting up, having thrown the blankets off so he could face his brother. Regulus watched him, eyes wide. "Sirius, I'm sorry," he said. "I really am. I told you not to make them mad." Sirius barked a laugh. "Really? You came to say I told you so?" "No, that's not—" "Oh, shove off, Reg." Now there was a spark of frustration in his brother's eyes. "You're not being fair. Come on, it's not like I could have stopped them." Sirius knew Reg was right, but it still hurt. He didn't know how to say that it had been the two of them against their family, against the world, that Regulus's silence had been a betrayal, an abandonment, a broken promise. "You could have done something, instead of just leaving me alone." But now it was Reg's turn to laugh, incredulously, and he said, "Leaving you alone?" The words hung between them. Guilt and anger twisted together in Sirius's chest. "I told you to go away." He reached out, shoving Regulus hard. His brother fell back onto the mattress, flailing to keep his balance and to stop him from tipping over the edge of the bed. Pajamas twisting around his legs and... Oh. Sirius froze. They were both breathing hard, chests heaving, even though they had been whispering. Sirius stared down at his brother's legs, where his trousers had twisted up, revealing the bottom half of his calf. There were 3 straight, thin lines right down the middle of his skin. Sirius looked up, and their eyes met. "Reg!" His brother flushed, reaching down hurriedly to adjust his pajamas, scurrying further away on the top of the blankets. "Reggie, did she—" "I don't want to talk about it." Sirius swore. That bitch! Don't call her that, Regulus said sharply, and Sirius looked down at him in disbelief. Reg, she hurt you. She wouldn't hurt me. His voice rose defensively. She's my mother. For a moment, Sirius was stunned into silence. Then quietly, she's my mother too. When Regulus refused to meet his eye, Sirius continued, Come on, you know it's not right. She's only trying to do what's best for me, Reg whispered furiously, words tripping over each other. To make sure I don't end up like... He stopped abruptly. Sirius felt sick. Go ahead, he said flatly. Reg shook his head, looking away. No, go ahead, Sirius urged, anger licking the back of his voice. Say it, Reg. I want to hear it. Sirius, to make sure you don't end up like me, right? Is that it? His brother's eyes were shiny with tears. But Sirius didn't care. He pushed himself out of bed, grabbing a travelling cloak from his wardrobe. Sirius? Regulus whispered. When his brother ignored him, he tried again. Sirius, where are you going? Sirius shut the door to his wardrobe roughly, and he grabbed the wand from where he'd stored it in his desk. Home, he said. It was raining in Hogsmeade. Cold water pelted Sirius as he struggled up towards the school grounds, wind whipping raindrops past the heavy hood of his cloak until his hair was dripping wet. He had waited until early morning, while it was still dark, to sneak out of his room. His parents kept flue powder in the office down the hall, and there was no telling where creature might be roaming at night. Near dawn, though, the house elf started on breakfast, and Sirius knew that he would be in the kitchen. He had held his breath as he tiptoed down the hall, sure that he'd opened the office door to find his father waiting, but Regulus hadn't alerted anyone. He hadn't gone to wake up the parents or find creature. He hadn't tried to stop Sirius from leaving at all. No one approached him as he thumped through the muddy grass and made his way to Hogwarts' front entrance. The doors opened easily, and the halls were empty. The only sounds were the snoring portraits and Sirius's own cloak dripping water onto the floor. He had to wake the fat lady to give her the password, and she grumbled as she swung open, allowing him entrance into the common room. Remus sat up when the door to their room swung open, rubbing his eyes. For a moment he just blinked in the dark, but then his face split into a grin. Sirius! He leapt out of bed, clearly overjoyed to see his friend. Sirius couldn't help but grin back, pushing his wet hair out of his face. All right, Leafin? He tried to keep his voice nonchalant as he dropped his cloak to the floor. Even though his body still felt wired with adrenaline, he and Reg had always talked about running away from home, but neither of them had actually done it. Freezing, isn't it? Sirius pointed his wand at the fireplace. Incendio. What are you doing here? Had enough. He looked down at his boots, which were caked with mud, and concentrated on pulling them off. Got into an argument with Dad, then the whole family got into it. All the usual stuff. Call me a blood traitor, the shame of the family, etc., etc. He collapsed onto his bed, heart racing with the memory of his family's voices. So I left. James would have wanted to talk about it, to ask if he was okay, to tell him that he shouldn't be ashamed, to insist that his parents were wrong. Sirius braced himself, but Remus just said, Wow, how'd you get here? Good old Remus. Flue powder, Sirius shrugged. To the pub in the village. Then I just walked up. Wow, Remus repeated. Before the other boy could ask any more questions, Sirius sat up. I'm starving. They sent me to bed last night without any dinner. Come on, get dressed. Breakfast. Although they attempted to take their seats, as usual, in the Great Hall, acting as though nothing was wrong, McGonagall stormed over immediately. Mr. Black, she said sharply, what is the meaning of this? Sirius smiled cheekily. Missed you too, Professor. Her lips twitched, but the frown remained staunchly on her face. You were seen walking onto the grounds from Hogsmeade at 6 o'clock in the morning. Do you care to explain yourself further? Sirius shook his head. Not really, Professor. That's pretty much all there is to it. McGonagall shook her head and sighed, a note of pity in her eyes. It made Sirius uncomfortable. Very well, Mr. Black. I shall have to contact your parents, of course, so they know where you are. But a flock of owls was sweeping into the room, and Sirius could see the largest of them, a stately eagle owl clutching a thick red envelope. "No need," he said, as the bird dropped the letter into his plate. He looked at it pointedly, then smiled warily up at McGonagall. "I think they know exactly where I am." He held her eye as he picked it up, ripping it open before anyone could see his fingers trembling. Immediately, his mother's voice filled the hall, shrill and icy with rage. The other students turned to look, and McGonagall winced. "Sirius Orion Black!" his mother's voice screamed. "How dare you defy your father in this manner?" Next to him, Remus covered his ears, but Sirius remained completely still, refusing to drop McGonagall's gaze. "Consorting with half-breeds and blood traitors, turning your back on this family. If your grandfather was alive, he'd have disowned you the minute you assaulted. You will remain at school until the end of the year, and think about the shame and dishonour you brought onto your noble title. Don't think we won't disinherit you. You are not our only son." With that, the letter burst into flames until it was nothing but a pile of ash on the table. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sirius could feel the eyes of every person in the room on him. Let them watch then, he thought, anger still a blistering ember in his belly. But he kept his composure, spooning scrambled egg nonchalantly onto his plate. He glanced up at McGonagall again. "You can send Mother an owl if you like, Professor, but I doubt she'd read it." "Very well, Sirius," McGonagall nodded. "Just try to keep out of trouble, will you?" She made her way stiffly back to the teacher's table at the far end of the hall. "I don't care," he reminded himself fiercely. Who gives a toss what they think?" But he still felt a wash of relief once he finished eating and was able to leave the curious stares behind. The next morning was much better. When they woke on Christmas Day, Sirius and Remus discovered piles of wrapped presents on their bed. Remus almost looked perplexed as he unwrapped a lumpy package containing various snacks, along with a set of gobstones from James and a box of chocolate frogs from Peter. "Merry Christmas," Sirius said, stifling a yawn. Peter had sent him a box of frogs too, and there was an annual of his favourite Quidditch team from James, which made him smile. "Merry Christmas," Remus responded. "I didn't get anyone presents." He scratched his ear, looking a bit guilty. "I didn't know what they would—" "Oh, don't worry about that," Sirius reassured him, heading into the bathroom. No one expected you to." When he came back into the room, there was a large, flat, square package on his bed. Andromeda. Sirius ripped it open as fast as he could, buzzing with excitement. "It's from Andromeda," he explained to Remus, who responded to his enthusiasm with a bemused grin. When he pulled the record out of the package, Remus's eyes lit up and he hurried over. Every holiday, Andromeda sent him a Muggle album. It's how Sirius had created his collection, his most prized possessions, aside from his wand. This one had a black cover, overlaid with an image of a man standing in front of a huge amplifier playing a guitar. His hair was wild and curly, and he had a powerful stance, legs apart, outlined in gold. "Electric Warrior," read the text. "T.Rex." "Ooh, T.Rex. I think I've heard of them," Remus murmured. Sirius flipped the album over, eagerly scanning the track listing. Remus shifted impatiently. "Stick it on," he urged, eyes bright with excitement. Sirius did, sliding the disc out carefully and placing it onto the turntable. They watched it begin to spin, and the room filled with music, a smooth, sliding throb.
Beneath the bebop moon, I wanna croon with you.
They sat hypnotized, utterly immersed in the music. When it stopped, Sirius flipped the record immediately to its B-side, and they sat in silence while it played. When it was over, Sirius wordlessly turned the record and began again at the beginning. Sirius was the best person to listen to music with. Unlike James and Peter, he didn't talk. He didn't get distracted. For the slower, dreamier songs, they lay next to each other on the bed, sharing smiles. On the catchier riff, they tapped their feet or swayed to the melodies. They didn't need to speak. As long as music was playing, the entire world fell away, and Sirius felt warm and safe. Eventually, halfway through the second listen, Frank came in. "Merry Christmas, lads. Come on, breakfast." The great hall was an explosion of colour. Glittering ropes of red, green and gold tinsel sparkled from every rafter, and 12 enormous trees twinkled with multicoloured coloured lights and baubles on every branch. Sirius grinned, thinking to himself that maybe Christmas wasn't so bad after all. After breakfast, the boys raced back to their room, where Sirius immediately started the album again. When they had listened through a third time, Remus announced, "It's the coolest thing I've ever heard." Sirius nodded solemnly, elated that the other boy loved it just as much as he did. They spent the rest of the day eating their way through Peter's chocolate frogs, playing rowdy games of exploding snap, and listening to music in the common room. By dinner time, Sirius had memorized all the words to Jeepster. He hummed between bites of food, watching Remus stuff his face, and by the time the meal was over, they were both tapping their feet. As Sirius went to bed that night, he didn't think about his family, or his mother's letter, or even his brother. Instead, he played T.Rex on repeat in his mind, falling to sleep with the melody still in his head.
You slice so good with bones so